More on the legal implications of all of this for the president and for Rudy Giuliani. I'm joined by NBC News legal analyst Mimi Rocah. She's also a former assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, also the same office that Rudy Giuliani used to head. So this news that the SDNY is looking into what Rudy Giuliani was doing overseas in Ukraine, explain what they're doing. Also, very weird, since Giuliani used to run the office.
It is unusual, but more credit to them for doing that. And in many ways, I think that they're looking at Giuliani, who used to be a former U.S. attorney, and saying, "What are you doing?" Right? It makes it all the more sort of shocking and incredulous that he might have committed crimes like this, and that he's hiding behind this veil of being the president's lawyer. I mean, I almost wish we could stop calling him that, because none of this stuff that he's doing with respect to Ukraine, Giuliani, is as a lawyer, a legal matter pertaining to the president. I mean, if he is what it looks like they're getting at here is they're looking at his work with these two men who have now been indicted, Parnas and Furman, to, amongst other things, get the ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, out.
Yeah.
Why? Because some people in Ukraine didn't want her because she's a corruption fighter. Giuliani didn't want her because she didn't like what he was doing on the side and behind the back of the State Department. Those are not legitimate reasons. And Giuliani isn't acting legitimately as the president's lawyer in doing that. There's no privilege here.
Well, why is there no privilege here? Is it because he said the State Department sent me and he's got text messages with State Department officials?
Well, I mean, there's no privilege. I would flip the question around. Why on earth would there be a privilege, right? There's no attorney-client privilege because, again, he's not really acting as Trump's personal lawyer here. He's acting as sort of an agent, a fixer, not even a legitimate agent, right? I mean, he's doing things that he's not in a position legitimately to be doing. Namely, why is Rudy Giuliani, who has no security clearance that we know of, no real security clearance, no bona fides, no credentials with the State Department, why is he working to get an ambassador, an ambassador out of office? I mean, there's no legitimate explanation for that.
So I'm wondering, how were the Democrats, in your opinion, building their case? I guess the allegation is that the president nefariously was trying to get the government of Ukraine to investigate his political rivals, both what happened in 2016 and Joe Biden for 2020. The president says it's all fine, but now what you're seeing are ambassadors, diplomats, text messages that show that behind the scenes, the president was seemed to be directing Rudy Giuliani, and there was a deliverable. What about the case that they're building? What do you make of it?
I think they're building a good case, and I think the way it's working is you've got sort of the hard evidence, right? You've got the phone call between Trump and Zelensky. You've got the text messages of people in real time saying, whoa, what's going on? Now what they need to do is find out what the whoa was, right? What made people say that? Was there any, you don't need this, right? All you need for impeachment, and I think is very bad, would be showing that Trump and Giuliani were soliciting this help for their campaign, which they pretty clearly were doing just on the face of the phone call and the text messages. But we want to find out everything that happened. And I think what we're going to dig into is, was there a deliberate withholding of the aid to Ukraine in exchange for that digging up dirt?
Can Barr get involved on this?
Well, I mean, Barr
in the SDNY investigation?
He could. Yes, so far he hasn't, and that's good. There are certain kinds of charges where the SDNY needs to go to Barr for permission. The kind of public corruption type charges, campaign finance charges, technically they have to get a sort of consult from the Department of Justice. He doesn't actually approve them, but you're not going to go and do this if you're a U.S. attorney without giving a heads up to the Department of Justice. I think at this point, now that they've had these charges, they've had this press conference, there's so much out there in the public realm. And I know Bill Barr is, doesn't really seem to care that much about what people think. But even for him at this point, if he tried to shut it down, it seems to me that impeachment proceedings for him would begin the next day.
Mimi Rocah. Mimi, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.